So, welcome to SIETAR Europa webinar number 2 this year. I'm Joanna Zell, and on behalf of the virtual team committee, I'm happy to welcome our speakers today, Laxmi, Chaudhry, Lucy Fogarty, and Mohit Rajan. Laxmi and Mohit are originally from India. Mohit is currently in India, Laxmi is in the UK, where she is based, and Lucy is from the UK and based in the UK. We've got 54 participants, and I would love to encourage you to write down in the chat window where you are based, or also maybe where you are from. In the intercultural world, it's pretty tricky from time to time. People say, I'm originally from, for example, Poland, just like in my case, based in Germany. And here I can see that we've got a very beautiful greeting from Ulrich. Namaste from Henstedt, Ulzburg. We've got participants from the Netherlands, from Denmark, ciao from Italy, from the UK, one person based in Istanbul, Polish in Switzerland. Hello from Silicon Valley. Bonjour de France, Cologne, and the UK, Milwaukee, Malaysia, Basie, Germany, London, from Pune, from India, and Namaste from Krakow, from Poland as well, from Bavaria, Malta, Ankara in Turkey, and Leipzig, Brazilian in Switzerland, Lebanon. So you see, we've got the whole world coming to the webinar. I'm really, really happy to see so many of you. One more country that hasn't appeared so far, from Hungary. Very warm welcome to everyone. Please note that this webinar is recorded. So whenever you would like to maybe tell your friends that it was a fantastic experience and that you learned something new on India, you are very welcome to share the link afterwards and to ask them to join. Right now, I would like to tell you that you can use the chat window as well for private conversations. So for example, when you notice someone you are friends with in the chat window, you can also use, for example, the name which appears here when you click on the drop window. And yeah, we are ready, we are set to start. Once again, a very warm welcome to Mohit. I met you last year in India during the SIETAR India conference, which was fantastic. Back then, you helped me a lot. I'm grateful until the end of my days. And very warm welcome to Laxmi. We met actually in Valencia at the SIETAR Europa conference some time ago, and it was a very, very nice, touching moment. And I'm looking forward to seeing you hopefully also in Belgium in May. Lucy, we haven't met in person so far, so I'm looking forward to another occasion. And Lucy is the co-creator of the Culture Bop Games. And as the webinar is on the spotlight on India, the three presenters have decided that it's Laxmi and Mohit who are going to present it. And Lucy is a little bit in the background, responsible for the technical side. So I'm handing over to you, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Joanna.
So thank you, Joanna. I would like to wish everyone good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all the participants joining us. My name is Laxmi Chaudhry. As it is a cultural program on India today, I'd like to also give you my background. My background, originally, I am Indian from north part of India, with the diversity of India being so big. And I was born in East Africa, in Tanzania. I've been living in Britain 51.5 years. And out of those 51 and a half, I've lived 5 years in Asia Pacific. This brings me to my cultural background and my business background, which is in human resources and training. I've been working in this field for over 40 years, and I'm very much a practitioner, and I have worked in over 38 cultures in the 3 jobs I held in 27 years of corporate life. So I'm looking forward to working with Mohit and Lucy today in presenting this, and will be bringing some of the business aspects to this, although we will be looking at the game, which is full of fun and very easy to learn. So I hope you will enjoy it with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Laxmi. Thank you very much. A warm welcome to all our attendees from all over the world. I am Mohit Rajan. I serve as the CTO of Bop Games, essentially a company that builds cartoon-based games to impart cultural values. I've been a technologist for about 25 years of my life, about 25 years. I've spent about 18 years in America as an IT professional. I'm currently based in India. I've been in India for the last 2 years. I've spent time, as I said, in America. I've spent about 6 years in London as a director of an tech company, and also lived in Ireland. With me on this call today is also Lucy Fogarty. I think she's turned off her webcam, but she serves as the CEO of Bop Games. So with that being said, I think it's time we dive into our webinar and a little about Indian culture. Okay, so to all attendees, I'm going to just turn off my webcam. The fact that we are starting the webinar, and this way, given the bandwidth, I'm in India, so I'm a little concerned that I don't want to use up much bandwidth and make the presentation slower. So I'm just turn off my webcam.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to turn off my camera, and I would like to encourage all our participants. We've got 78 participants, which is fantastic, to ask all the possible questions at the end of the webinar. Additionally, you can write the questions in the chat box. However, the answers are going to appear at the end. So enjoy.
Thank you, Joanna. Okay, so let's dive into Indian culture. This slide here is about India on the rise. And I just want to give you all an overview of India before we dive specifically into Indian cultural values. India, as most of you know, and for those of you who don't know, is one of the most religiously, ethnically, and linguistically diverse nations in the world. We have almost 2,000 distinct ethnic groups, and these ethnic groups tend to fall into 2 main categories. One of them is the Indo-Aryans, and the other the Dravidians. The Dravidians being the original inhabitants of India. And those of you are aware, there was a migration from the steppes of Central Asia, the Aryans who actually moved into India almost 6,000 years back. And they are essentially located in the northern part of India. Dravidians predominantly tend to live in the south. From a religious standpoint, again, India is extremely diverse. It is the birthplace of 4 dharmic religions, that being Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, and Jainism. The majority of Indians are Hindus. About 84% of Indians are Hindus. The second largest religious community in India are the Muslims, who comprise about 15% of the population. India has about 780 different languages or dialects, of which 22 are conferred official status. As you can see at the bottom left corner of your screen, I have the Indian rupee note. So those of you who have been to India and have ever had the opportunity to touch or feel an Indian rupee note, you have actually 16 different languages that basically spell out the denomination of the note. India has a very, very young population, and it has 1.3 billion people. And it is the second most populous country in the world, and population of India is predicted to surpass that of China by 2028. India is also the world's largest democracy. About 66% of Indians live in the rural areas, the rest of them living in the urban areas, in the metropolitan cities. And that's obviously changing. There's obviously a flow of people from the rural areas to the urban areas, the urban cities. 17 of the 20 fastest growing cities in the world in the next decade are projected to be in India. That's Bengaluru, New Delhi, Hyderabad, and Chennai. India also has a very, very young population. About 830 million people, or 65% of the population, it is predicted to become consumers in the next 20 years. It also has a rapidly emerging middle class, thanks to liberalization policies of the Indian government starting in the early 1990s. And again, the consumer spending in India is expected to more than double, almost $3.1 trillion by 2030. It's currently about $1.4 trillion. India has the sixth largest economy in the world, with the current GDP about 2.6 trillion. That's about 1/5 that of the United States. And India is predicted, again, to become world's second largest economy by 2030, next only to China, even surpassing that of the United States. In terms of the growth of the economy, the International Monetary Fund forecasts that India's GDP it will continue to grow in the next couple of years about 7.5%, beating what is predicted of China's growth, which is set at about 6.2% the next decade. As they say, India grows while the world slows. India is also, has the highest number of scientists and engineers. Rapid digital adoption in India, and this is occurring at exponential pace. India has the second largest smartphone market in the world. And again, it is predicted that it will have about 1 billion internet users by 2030. And given this large pool of tech-savvy, aspirational young Indians, India is expected to be a hotbed of innovation and disruption in several different domains, and that includes the digital domain, biotechnology, pharmacy, artificial intelligence, and the fintech industries. That's my overview of India. Okay, Culture Bop Games. Essentially, what we do at Culture Bop Games is that we're trying to find a new, possibly a unique and innovative approach to imparting cultural values. And what makes us different? What makes us different is that we are leveraging the power of cartoons and the power of gamification to impart cultural knowledge and basically raise cultural awareness and competence of trainees. And at the very heart of our approach, what makes us different? The very heart of approach is the problem solving and practical application of cultural knowledge methodology. And what do I mean by that? Traditionally, cultural training has been administered where the cultural trainer comes in and gives a PowerPoint slide, and essentially the trainee is kind of a passive recipient of cultural knowledge. We change all that. Here, the trainee learns through a trial and error approach. And basically, he gets to play the games. It takes more onus for his own learning journey. And this makes the game far more interesting for the trainee. It also boosts participation and engagement in learning. It also makes it far more competitive because we're using gamification. And what about the trainee? When the trainee comes in with our games is that we are not, and I'll say this at the very, very outset, we are not attempting to eliminate the cultural trainer. Absolutely not. I mean, all these games do is help the trainee embellish their own trainings and make it far more interesting for the trainee. So what the trainer does is essentially brings his or her deep cultural experience, and basically fosters a sharing of perspectives and opens up a discussion about the cultural value that's essentially illustrated by one of our cartoons. So there's a slight shift in the role of the trainer and the trainee here, with the trainee taking on more onus for his own learning, and the trainer essentially fostering an open discussion and basically engendering a sharing of different perspectives of the cultural value that's being illustrated.
So today our goal, thank you Mohit there, our goal today is to illustrate generally the accepted values of the Indian culture via a cartoon-based game, which Mohit was mentioning, we acknowledge that the Indian culture is a complex and it is continuously evolving. We will make certain generalizations about the Indian culture and the Indian cultural norms. However, what we want to acknowledge that there are individual differences, and the interaction you have will be perhaps different to what we may be talking as a norm, because we do have those individual differences which we need to remind ourselves of. We also acknowledge that there's a range of perspectives which are existing within the Indian culture, and there's always an exception to the rule. Each cartoon, when we start showing you, will be only one representation amongst many generally accepted Indian values. The cartoons are a trigger for opening up a discussion about the Indian values and how these values manifest themselves in the Indian culture. And the cultural trainer brings their experience and depth of cultural knowledge from a very practical point of view. So people are kind of made aware and can use those ideas in working effectively with India.
Thanks for that, Laxmi. Okay, so we dive into our games. Just to let you know that these games, this particular game was built specifically for our webinar today. Normally, our games have about 13 unique cartoons, and we have games on, a range of cultures. We have American culture, Chinese, Indian, and British culture. Those are the 4 countries where you build the game. And our games are quite homogeneous, regardless of the culture that's being imparted or being taught. This is what our typical screen looks like when you actually, play the games. On the left of your screen, you see a cartoon, some dialogue. So it's essentially cultural values being represented through a mini story or an anecdote to make it more interesting. And on the right, you have 4 values, 4 generally accepted values, and the cartoon essentially is illustrating or depicting only one manifestation of that country-specific cultural value. And what the training is required to do, again, in a trial and error approach, iteratively, is to play the game and basically match the cartoon that best represents the specific cultural value that's been depicted in the cartoon. As you can see on the just about what is the value, we also have scoring, and just to make it more competitive, to keep the trainer engaged and more interested in the game. We also have difficulty levels, so we have kind of siloed or categorized our cartoons into easy and difficult. This is one of the easier category cartoons, with only a single star against difficulty level. And then, of course, the user or the player or the trainee, the learner, can move forward or back as he plays the game. Okay, a little bit about this cartoon. I'm give you a few moments here to take it all in. But essentially, what this cartoon is an office setting in India. You have a boss, he's wearing a tie, and as you can see, there are high-rise buildings. So imagine he's in Mumbai, and he's basically calling one of his employees on the phone and asking why he hasn't arrived at work. And the employee essentially answers back saying that, oh, it's Rahu Kalam right now, I will be there later. So what is Rahu Kalam? What particular cultural value is being depicted or illustrated in this cartoon? The answer is superstitious. Indians have a tendency to be superstitious. In fact, Indian culture is replete with rules or beliefs that essentially separate the auspicious from the inauspicious. And what does Rahu Kalam mean? Rahu in Sanskrit or Hindi means bad omen or ill omen, and Kalam means time. So according to Hindu or Vedic astrology, there is a time in the day where it's considered inauspicious to indulge in any activity, especially a new venture. And that lasts for about 90 days. Now, obviously in India, traditionally we've been using the luni-solar calendar. Those 90-day period differs depending upon the time of year it is. And this is one example of the superstition, that is quite evident in Indian culture. I want to give you some. That's right. So Lucy clicked on the answer, and as you can see, there's an explanation behind the scenes, and the way we envision, the trainer using this game essentially is that when the trainee gets the answer right, you have a detailed explanation giving the trainer an opportunity to basically help the trainee get a more deeper understanding of culture. And what you could, as a trainer, what you could possibly do is ask the trainer how this particular cultural value would manifest itself in their own culture, and then probably give examples, different examples of how this cultural value would manifest itself, let's say, in a foreign culture. A few more examples of superstition in Indian culture. For example, those of you who've been to India, it's impossible to get a haircut on a Tuesday because it's considered a bad omen to cut your hair on a Tuesday, and all barber shops are closed on that day. Or witnessing, let's say, boiling milk is also considered a bad omen. Sweeping the floor at night. The Indians believe that when you sweep the floor at night, you're sweeping away all the good luck. It's another example of a bad omen. On the flip side, what are considered good omens? Good omens are if you see a peacock, which is the national bird of India, or an elephant crossing, that's considered a positive omen. And Indians, as I said, tend to be very, very superstitious. And a perfect example, one last example that I want to give of superstition in India is that during Diwali, which is the festival of lights and the biggest festivals in India, it's a national holiday, everything is closed, the stock market is open just for a very, very short period of time. And that's called Muhurat trading. So everybody trades stocks. Just during this short period of time, the stock market goes up significantly because people buy a lot of shares and stocks during that period of time because they believe that by trading during that short interval, they're going to have greater returns on the investment in the coming years. That's another example of superstition in India. Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to take in the cartoon. That's a very, very good question, Tina. I mean, how common how many people believe in Rahu Kalam? You'd be quite surprised that even among the educated in India, even those living in metropolitan cities and the young, they tend to be quite superstitious. And of course, this is more dominant, more common in the rural areas. But it also exists in the urban areas. Okay, this cartoon again, just married, and here is a couple who just got married, and they're asking for the blessings of the elders. And this cartoon basically speaks to respect and honor, essentially for your elders and all the members of your family in general. Respect for elders is a very, very cardinal and important Indian value. And what they're doing here is essentially touching their feet. And in India, this is referred to as Charan Sparsh. Charan, which means feet, and Sparsh is to touch. The act of touching feet is referred to as Charan Sparsh. And essentially, why are they touching the feet of their parents? Essentially, it is an act or a symbol of both respect and submission to your elders. And it's kind of a two-pronged process here, if I may. The reverential bowing actually is just an act of showing respect, and the touching of the feet, is an act of humility and basically suppressing one's ego. And the children, especially in the rural areas, especially among the more conservative families in India, are taught early on, instructed by their parents to touch the feet of their parents, grandparents, and even the older relatives. But one thing that I would like to point out over here and emphasize that touching the feet in India is not necessarily religious, although what you see on the screen is a depiction of a Hindu wedding, but it transcends religions and religious affiliations. The touching of feet goes, as I say, transcends religious affiliations, and this is also common among the Buddhists and then the Jains in India. And as Laxmi mentioned early on, that India is a complex culture, and it's continuously evolving. This practice varies quite markedly, across ethno-religious groups. For example, in some communities in India, females, the daughters of a family, would not touch the feet of the parents. only the sons who do it. In some cases, you don't touch the feet of your in-laws. You only do that to your immediate family and to your, touch the feet of your parents and grandparents. As I said, this practice varies across religious groups. Okay, climbing the corporate ladder. And this is, again, a mini anecdote or a story. It's got an office setting, as you can see. They have their terminals on, the computer monitors are shown. And the person on the left is essentially saying, I was surprised about Arun being the very common name in India. Arun's quick promotion. And the person on the other side is saying, unexpected. After all, our manager is also Tamil Brahmin. This particular cartoon depicts or illustrates or speaks to the group-oriented nature of Indians. Indians traditionally have tended to coalesce around groups that have been organized around religious and caste lines. There's a new word that's been coined. It's called ethnic nepotism, which is quite common in India, where a boss, promotes somebody from his own community, someone with whom he shares a common heritage or a background. Now, given that you have so many multinationals in India now, obviously this practice is obviously changing. It was a more performance-based and meritocratic system. But it is still quite prevalent in India. In fact, some of the biggest business houses in India would not even employ, should I say, people outside of their own community. They would make sure that the senior executives, hail from, people from their religious group.
Mohit, there is a short question. How would young educated Indians show respect to their boss?
That actually speaks more to the hierarchical nature of Indian society. That has less to do with coalescing around an religious group. And in India, in the corporate setting, given that India is a role-based and hierarchical society, most subordinates almost accord the same respect to their bosses, like they would to their own parents and grandparents, and vice versa. Even the opposite also is true, where a boss would just not see a subordinate as an employee of the organization, but also be involved in their personal affairs. For example, asking a young man, when are you getting married? It's time you get married, or things like that. So the relationship very rarely is just restricted to the professional realm or the commercial realm, and it's all quite fuzzy in India, where your professional life and your personal life is quite is intertwined together.
Okay, so you see this new cartoon, Haggling Housewife. I'm sure you've been reading about it, and I would like to add that Indians are very value conscious. They're always seeking value for money, whether they're shopping for their vegetables, even services, even to a point where they're doing property purchases, medical, healthcare, even when you're in hospital and getting an operation done, that would also be haggled for the price. And in India, many times I notice when people go to India, and I particularly when I'm shopping, I never pay the actual price. I actually literally reduce it to almost 40% because I know the price should be lower than the 40% as well. And normally I would walk away. However, if I'm very desperate, but I try not to show my desperation that I really need it, so I literally walk away, and they chase you to get the things done. So haggling, being value conscious would be a very important part on an everyday basis. Now in businesses, I would like to say one doesn't haggle. Of course, we usually do the normally salary increases when we're looking for promotions, or when we're trying to look for a new job, we want the best salary because status is really important. As we were talking earlier with Mohit on hierarchy, the status produces the hierarchy, hierarchy produces the status, and therefore the bigger the salary, the bigger the office, the bigger the car and all that. But haggling, I would like to say, it's a kind of in the DNA of the Indians, if I could use that in a very general way.
Yes, and what I would like to add to what Laxmi just said, there's a reason for this. And if you trace the genesis of this particular cultural value, I mean, if you go to India and you go to the local markets where most of India does the shopping, of course, now there is a shift towards online shopping and delivery and things like that. But traditionally, you went to the local market and you shop for vegetables, onions, potatoes, and there was no price. And so Indians didn't know what the actual price was, and that's the reason why you don't want to be taken for a ride, by the vendor, and that's why you, as Laxmi mentioned, you drop the right off the bat. Whatever they say, you say, I'm going to give you 50% of that, and that's where you start bargaining.
And this one is relating to, as you can see, doctor or engineer. I would like to say, please read the cartoon. Very interesting what it's talking about. And I wonder if anybody knows what that really, the value would be on this. Indians, as I said a little bit earlier, are very conscious of the hierarchy. They're very conscious of the status. So they would want their child, especially if it's a girl, to marry someone of a higher rank, so that she has a more comfortable life and she will be looked after well because she has that status. In India, I've heard even when a husband is a doctor, the wife is called Dr. Saiba because it's the lady, it's like that lady doctor. She's not a doctor qualified, but because she's the wife of the doctor, they will call her with that respect that she's the doctor's wife, like a Dr. Saiba. And I would like to say, because Indian parents are also quite risk averse, they want the daughter to have steady income, good class of life, and enjoy her married life. And normally the marriages would take place within the same ethnic caste, I would like to say. Preferably, most of the arranged marriages in India today, still I think 90%, if I'm not mistaken, are arranged marriages. These arranged marriages are based on status of the person, the class, the caste of the person, the education of the groom and the bride, and then the matches are made, and they call it, these matches are made in heaven. So in the West, we fall in love and then get married. In India, you marry first and then you fall in love. And we've noticed that many of these arranged marriages are very, very successful. Now, in the modern India and in the new generational India, I would like to say, most of the marriages are love marriages because you're working along with many different castes in the company and people fall in love. And at times, the parents still find that very difficult to accept, especially if the girl is going to marry a man from a lower caste, because our surnames, by the way, are known by our caste. So they do not want their daughter of a higher caste going into a lower caste. And in this situation, I'd like to talk about the business side, because titles, seniority, designations are important. Generally, the subordinates would never challenge a manager. They do not also express their opinions as such, especially when you do brainstorming. And can you imagine when you do remote brainstorming, that becomes even harder to listen for real answers. And of course, there are ways of getting those real answers. If not in the group, one can do one-on-one questions. And most of the decisions are made from the top. So it's not an egalitarian style of management there. It's more very hierarchical, and subordinates obey and respect things very much from what their managers are doing. And this can at times cause a lot of problems when you are working across the different cultures on a remote basis, which I do a lot of this with companies in UK, Europe, America, etc., and vice versa into India. it is a big challenge because you don't actually get the real answers coming even from a subject matter expert. So this is...
Laxmi, there are actually two questions regarding the Indian reality. How many castes are there, and how do you as an Indian know someone's caste of origin?
Okay, so the answer to the second question would be based on the surname. So Indians amongst themselves from the surnames would depict which caste that person is coming from. As a Westerner or outside of India, we wouldn't know that, in the sense that if you're not an Indian, you wouldn't know that. Now, India, as we heard earlier, is, I mean, from Mohit, that it is a diverse nation. It's a continent, not a country. And so, from my side, if I give you my example, I would be able to tell, because I'm from north part of India, most of the names in that part of the world, in that northern part of India, I would know which caste people come from. And perhaps Mohit, because he's based in the south, he would know more of that. I know some of the south, but not all of it. The answer to your first question, which was relating to,
How many castes?
Sorry, give me that question again. I just lost it.
How many castes?
Oh, we have 4 main caste groups, by the way. Just for simplicity, I'd like to share with you. The top caste we call Brahmins, which is the priest caste in simple terms. So they're supposed to be more educated and worldly wise, and sometimes even they could be the more fairer people, even in color terms. It could be. I'm not saying it is the main thing. The second caste is Kshatriya, which is the warrior caste. So it's like defending things if there's a war or anything like that. The third would be Vaishyavas. For simplicity, I would say the professional caste.
Right.
And then we have the Sudras, which are on the trades level. I've made it very simple just to make it easier to understand. And then we have the fifth caste as such, which are the Dalits. In the old days, it is really politically incorrect to use. They used to be called the untouchables, but now they are called the Dalits, and they are the caste which generally do the most menial work of cleaning streets, toilets, etc. However, if you all may remember that Mahatma Gandhi, he brought this caste into the form of society, that they could be part of the whole Indian society by creating quota systems in India, whereby for state schools, state universities, state jobs, these castes could be allowed to work. And that has continued to some extent. And at times I hear, I have no proof at this point, but I hear this quota system is creating even much more of a nightmare when people are going for admissions to being a doctor. And sometimes from the lower caste, of course, their education system hasn't been as high, and this creates a lot of issues for the very well-educated and higher castes whose marks may be much higher, but they may not get the place. So this creates a lot of problems in India at times.
Yeah, thank you, Laxmi. There is one more question regarding caste as well. Is it possible to know the caste through the surnames?
That is from the surname we can depict the caste. We know what caste somebody comes through. So you might notice when you ever do interactions, and if you observe interactions between Indians, you will always see, first, whilst we are introducing ourselves, we will talk about our name and our surname. Immediately the other party knows which caste I belong to. If he wishes to continue the conversation, he will ask me something as to what I do or where do I live. That's also depicting what my status is and what is my hierarchy. So all these values, by the way, are so interrelated, and the conversation continues. Now, if my caste was lower or something, I've seen in real life people just stop the communication as well. Now, the modern Indian doesn't think like that. Many Indians living outside of India may not think like that. Many Indians living in India may not think like that. But the norm of the culture, especially when it comes to marriages, they are mainly caste driven.
Thank you.
Oh, right. This is a fantastic cartoon, and I really love this. India is we do call it jugaad in India, by the way. If you look at this cartoon, you can see that she's using a washing machine to make the lassi, which is a lovely drink made out of yogurt and water, or even with mango in it, etc. So now, why do we say that we think frugally, or why we do jugaad? Jugaad is generally practiced in India and in many, I would say, growing economies of the world, not just India, but many economies of the world which are growing at the moment, which is an innovative fix or an improvised solution because the resources are less. And at times, from a company's point of view, the companies are quite small, lean, and mean in a way. So they have to improvise situations. And the key principles of jugaad, if I may use, spelled Jugaad, there are some fantastic books on this, by the way, are seeking opportunity in adversity, doing more with less, thinking and acting flexibly, and keeping it very simple. And this, by the way, I have even seen it in my own life when we were organizing my daughter's wedding, where the wheel came off from a cart, a golf cart, and immediately he fixed it with a pin, by the way, until we were able to reach back into the hotel. And it then fell apart. Of course, they will fix it later, but it is, for the moment, it worked for us. Similarly, there are some fantastic stories about in Gujarat, where Mansukh Prajapati, and he's been noted as the most flexible, innovative entrepreneur, where he created Mitti Cool fridge made out of clay. Mitti means clay, and cool is, of course, cool, but fridge. And Gujarat is a very hot state, as most people will know. And in there, you cannot keep, and the electricity, because of infrastructure in India is not as progressive as the West at the moment. You cannot keep things cool, especially Gujaratis eat a lot of yogurts as well, and yogurts cannot be kept cool or they'll go off. So he created this, and is now selling for $50 only, but for 5 days, the fridge keeps it cool without any electricity being used. So there are many, many other situations where jugaad is done. For instance, even a water bottle, you don't have a shower in your house, and you need a shower. So you fix the water bottle mouth to the tube or to the tap up where your shower is, and you create little holes at the base of the bottle, and you get your shower ready-made without spending a penny.
Laxmi, may I ask you one question regarding the game, or maybe I can address this question to Mohit? Because jugaad is also the Polish kombinować, French plan B, and so on and so forth. And this is the question: how did you decide which were the most important cultural values to illustrate for each country?
Yeah, so essentially, Joanna, at least with the Indian games, I basically use my experience to basically identify all the generally accepted cultural values. So I was basically drawing from my own wealth of experience, having lived at least the first 22 years of my life in India. And in the case of the other games, for example, Lucy has been living in Britain for a very, very long time, and obviously she knows British culture very, very well. And so she basically compiled a list of cultural values, generally accepted cultural values, and qualify that we want to illustrate in our games. With regards to other games, for example, China and America, we basically use the services of experienced culturalists to basically compile the list of cultural values that we deem important.
If I may add also, Mohit, we're only playing one of the games today. We have 4 of them for the Indian games. Right. And I would say we know the main values, the key values are about 8 or 9. Of course, there are a lot of sub-values from there. So what we've done is we've tried to pick up, and because this is the cartoons are coming spontaneously rather than we haven't fixed the cartoons, we are picking up and explaining some of the values and to some extent on the business impact as well. But we have picked up the main values, key values of India, which are hierarchy, relationship, face, time, and everything else. And that's what we are trying to depict today, but from a fun point of view.
Yes, thank you very much on behalf of Alex, whose question it was. And there was one more question, whether we've got also the game for Switzerland. And you have just mentioned that there are altogether 4 games and Switzerland is not among them. Am I right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
We are building games right now, Joanna, and to all attendees for other cultures. The next ones that you're going to see are going to be Japan and Ireland, I believe, in Australia. Essentially, where there's large immigration, but we have several other countries in the pipeline right now. Okay. One thing that I wanted to say, someone had asked a question about the caste system, and of course, Laxmi did a fantastic job explaining the 4 main groups. One thing that people have to keep in mind when they talk about the caste system in India is that initially it was just purely based on a division of labor. So my father was a Brahmin, as Laxmi alluded to, and my father was a priest a long, long time back. And if I decided to become, let's say, a merchant, a Vaishya, I was allowed to do that. Over a period of time, it got rigid. So essentially, your caste was determined at birth. And that's where the problems came in. Initially, it was quite flexible and fluid. You could choose the caste you wanted to be part of, the group you wanted to be part of based on your interests. Over a period of time, rigidity set in, and you were basically, left. You belong to a particular caste from the time of your birth to your death. Okay, this is a very, very interesting cartoon. This is called the Mahakumbh Mela. I just went to the Kumbh Mela. I was just there. It's going on right now. It is the largest gathering of Hindu pilgrims in the world. So the Maha, basically in Sanskrit, the Hindi means large or grand or huge. The Mahakumbh Mela happens in a place in India, in what used to be called the erstwhile Allahabad, which has now been renamed Prayagraj. It is in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. And and it happens, as I said, in Prayagraj. And why is it so important? Why in Prayagraj, not anywhere else? Essentially, Prayagraj is at the confluence of 3 different rivers. So the Ganges, which is the largest river in India, Yamuna, which is also an extremely long river, and the mythical and the mystical Saraswati that doesn't exist. So Indians believe that there is this mystical river, and these 3 rivers come together. So there's this called the Sangam. Sangam in Hindi or Sanskrit means a confluence or a meeting point. And the holy area in Allahabad, this particular area is referred to as a Triveni Sangam. Triveni again meaning 3 in Sanskrit. The Mahakumbh Mela is held every 3 years. The Kumbh Mela is held every 3 years, but the Mahakumbh Mela happens once every 144 years. And the Kumbh Mela happens every 12 years. And there are 4 cities where the Kumbh Mela happens. And Prayagraj is where the Mahakumbh Mela happens. And currently, the Kumbh Mela that is being hosted is actually in Prayagraj. And the other cities where the Kumbh Mela is held is Nasik, and there's Ujjain and Haridwar, again, all in the northern part of India. Now, more important in this cartoon is the fact that this cartoon basically speaks to the religiosity in India. That's what we're trying to illustrate and depict here. So Indians tend to be very, very religious, and the influence of religion is extremely strong in India. Religion plays a very pivotal role, in the life of most Indians. And as I mentioned earlier in India on the Rise PowerPoint slide, India is the birthplace of 4 of the world's greatest religions, the largest religions, that are referred to as dharmic religions. So Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism are all dharmic religions. So as opposed to the Semitic religions, which are considered more faith-based, which requires a belief in a personal God. That is not true among the dharmic religions. In fact, most Indians believe in an impersonal higher spiritual power. There's no, so you can be a Hindu and not believe in a personalized version of a God.
So we've got one more question regarding the castes. Nikki is writing, sitting next to me is Huma from Pakistan. She says the caste system is directly linked to Hinduism, so it's culture for religion.
Say it again.
She says the caste system is directly linked to Hinduism, so it's culture through religion.
It is religion. She's absolutely right. In fact, that is absolutely right, because Christianity and Islam are classless religions as opposed to Hinduism. And what has also happened in India over a large period of time is that there's been a mass migration, especially among the lower castes that Laxmi was earlier alluding to, among the Dalits, the Harijans, and the Shudras, who comprise the lower castes in the Hindu hierarchy. And these are the people who are predominantly converted and been proselytized into Christianity and Islam. So lady from Pakistan is absolutely right when she says that caste is directly, deeply and related to Hinduism.
And the question regarding Jainism, what percentage we have of Jains, and Mohit, please help further. I believe it's around 1.5% of the people in India are Jains. Jain is a derivative from the Hindu religion, and Mahavir was their religious leader as such, if I may use that word. And it's a fairly newish religion, but it is around 1.5%. Am I correct?
That's about right, Lakshmi. Yes, it is an offshoot of Hinduism. You're absolutely right about that.
So is Sikhism, by the way, offshoot of Hinduism, and Buddhism as well. And Lord Buddha was born in Bodh Gaya, which was northeast of India. But Buddhism didn't really take too many roots in India. It went east. And therefore, we have more Buddhists in the East Asian countries than we have in India.
Yes, let me just qualify that. Gautama Buddha was actually a Nepali prince, actually born in Nepal. But you're right, Lakshmi, about that he actually attained moksha or salvation in Bodh Gaya.
In Bodh Gaya, yes.
Which is in the modern Indian state of Bihar, and which is also a place where people from all over the world congregate too, especially from Sri Lanka. So look at Buddhism, and you're absolutely right there again that there was a strain of Buddhism that spread north to China, which is referred to as the Mahayana sect of Buddhism, and was spread south into Southeast Asia, for example, Sri Lanka and Thailand and Vietnam. It's referred to as a Theravada strain of Buddhism. And of course, then you have Tibetan Buddhism. So when you go to Sri Lanka and you go to Anuradhapura and you talk to the Buddhists there, they have no idea who the Dalai Lama is, which I found quite fascinating, because they're not part of that particular sub-denomination of Buddhism.
So the next cartoon, which is the guest list, I'm sure you have read the bubbles there already. This is relating to Indians, of course, are very relationship-orientated cultures. They have a large network of friends and family, and they enjoy socializing and having big occasions. I don't know if any of you have been to any Indian weddings, but they're normally very, very big. We don't just invite Mr. and Mrs. It's always Mr. and Mrs. and family. And on the day of the wedding, you will not only have the Mr. and Mrs. and the family, but you might have some uninvited guests who were guests of the family you had invited, and we have to honor that. Now, of course, in India, there are big wedding halls. In fact, they call them also farms where the weddings are taking place, with multitude of cuisines, really fantastic cuisine. And you can have anything from 800 to even 1,500 people as your guests. And this is something because you cannot upset anyone. So not do I just invite my brother-in-law and his wife, my sister and her husband, but even his parents and his family too. If they have grandparents, I'd be inviting them as well. So our weddings are very large because we are very relationship orientated. Plus, we like to show off as well. So we want to do our best for our daughter or our son who's getting married. And they are very, very extravagant, lavish, lots of ceremonies. The minimum number of days we have as ceremonies is been reduced to 3 days only. But in many, many places in India, the weddings go on for almost 7 days. And from this point of view, if I bring the business level into it, if you are invited and you are a guest in India or you are working in India, but you are invited, it will be lovely for you to attend, because they will invite you, they will look after you, and they will feel very, very proud. And should you wish to wear some Indian clothes, that will be very honorable as well. And so in India, relationship making is very important. Spending time in getting to know your colleague or your people working with you is really utmost important. Time is not just money. Time is relationship. Time is who you know. Time is situation. Time is context as well. And of course, in the new generations, I would say people do not want very big weddings. It is quite small at times, but in general, most families, even if the couple want a small thing, they'll still end up doing a very big party for the rest of their clan, because they have to, reciprocate the invitation they've been to as well. So today, the Indian market, wedding market, is valued at 50 billion, by the way, growing at 30% annually, and around 25 million marriages are taking place annually in India.
Laxmi, shukran so much. Laxmi and Mohit, of course, and Lucy. We have 3 minutes left, and we have 3 more questions. So I would suggest to keep it simple right now, not to share any cartoons anymore, so that you have the chance to answer this last questions. And yeah, here we are.
Okay.
If you do upset them, do you lose face or is it shame? It was the question regarding the missing invitation for the wedding.
So what was the question, please? Would you like to repeat?
Do you lose the face when you upset the people with not inviting them to the wedding party?
Yes, especially if they are your relatives, immediate relatives, and also immediate relatives' relative. People lose face, they get quite upset. Sometimes relationships are broken forever.
Yeah.
And that can happen. Yes, it can happen.
Yeah.
Okay, and what would be an appropriate wedding gift as a Western guest?
As a Western gift?
As a Western guest, yeah.
Okay. So depending on how wealthy, what kind of status they have, you have to match the gift based on that. So it depends on the status of the person, what positions they hold, and then you would match the gift on that. Sometimes I feel maybe because sometimes people are already, they have everything in their homes, or most of the relatives will be giving a water jug set, a microwave, or whatever else. I find sometimes easier to do a nice money gift, which is of good amount, so they can buy what they like, and that's my personal preference, of course. But normally, I would say it would be based on the status and the position of the person.
Oh yes. So, dear webinar participants, Laxmi and Mohit and Lucy, they wanted to share as many cartoons as possible. And they filled this time with really wonderful drawings, with fantastic insight into Indian culture in this very nice, playful way. So, if you would like to know something more about the game, I would like to ask you, Mohit, right now to share the link to your website in the chat window. And I would love to ask all the participants to fill in this feedback regarding the webinar. Here are the questions. The webinar was valuable for practitioner use. The speaker had command of the topic, definitely, and the speaker used effective online presentation skills. So, of course, please notice that we have 2 speakers, and here you can see that the poll is going to be filled in by the participants. And you can see in the chat window the address where you can find more information on the Culture Bop Games, www.culturebopgames.com, and the creators are offering 5-day free trial, so it's worth clicking and having a look also at additional games, by the way, not only for India and the UK, but also for China. And apropos China, a happy Lunar New Year to everybody who celebrates it these days.
Joanna?
Yeah.
I would also like to mention that Laxmi Chaudhry has an amazing practice, and her website is One Stop HR. That's the name of her company. And she's been doing training for a number of years. So since they mentioned my company, I also want to mention Laxmi's.
Thank you, Mohit.
Thank you very much. It was fantastic. It was really, really fantastic just to learn so much about India in this playful way. And thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, Laxmi, for your expertise, for your fantastic insights and comments. Mohit and Lucy, thank you very much for sharing this wonderful tool with all of us and enabling learning by playing. And thank you to everyone in this webinar for your attention. Please note that the next webinar is on March 19th. The theme is intercultural training and the modern learner. It's going to be offered by Gabriela Węglowska at 6 p.m. 19th of March at 6 p.m. And you are very welcome to attend our cross-cultural coffee breaks. You are going to see all of them in the chat window right now. However, it's just the SIETAR Europa website where you are going to the virtual events and have a look over there. What is characteristic for this coffee breaks is that you are the participant as well, and you can also share your video and participate in the discussion, not only via the chat window, but also via video stream. Once again, a very warm thank you, and have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, wonderful afternoon, wherever you are based. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.